Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, at Hawk Blogger. And the man next to me, the man, the myth, Grant Cohn, with me to preview this game between the Seahawks and the 49ers. Grant, man, thanks for taking the time to do this. Everyone loves hearing from you. I don't know if everyone in the 49ers community loves hearing from you, but still find you the most entertaining follow on Twitter. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for sticking with me. People may not know we were supposed to do this about 20 minutes ago. You set up, and I just wandered away. I went down an elevator. I thought you wanted me to set up somewhere else, but this is a really nice setup. If you're at home and you don't understand, he's got like a really professional camera. This is beyond me. I'm learning. When
you don't have talent, you got to make up for it in tech, and so I'll do what I can.
Or when you have both, you're the Hawk Blogger.
Yeah. Sure. There's a lot of interesting storylines in this game. I think one of the things that I'm curious about is injury situation for the 49ers. Before we get into that specifically, talk to me about where the 49ers are. 5-4. 1-2 in the division, getting Christian McCaffrey back, winning against the Bucs. Is this a team on the rise? How would you just kind of describe this team?
Yes, they're on the rise a little bit, but they melted down during a victory last week in Tampa. They're not a very together team right now. They're 5-4, and last year was so much fun and it was easy for them. Most of them. It's not like that anymore. I think they're waiting for it to be easy. McCaffrey came back. They thought that would make it easy again, and it wasn't. If you go back and look at the Bucs game, Moody misses his third kick in the fourth quarter, and Deebo gets into a fight with Moody and the long snapper. They're winning. They were winning by 3 at that. They're this close to unraveling, and I don't know if the Seahawks can make them unravel. But if they were to lose today, the whole thing would unravel. It's being held together by duct tape. Now they do have a lot of talented players, but they're 5-4 for a reason.
Well, so as you kind of talk about, we'll talk about the Seahawks in particular and what they can do here or not. Injury-wise, we got news from Adam Schefter middle of the night, which I happen to be up because I can't sleep for shit. But George Kittle, who seemed like a player that was expected to play, practiced most of the week, is not expected to play, or at least that was the word then. Trent Williams, who had not practiced all week and sounded pretty iffy, is expected to play. Was that surprising to you?
Extremely surprising. With Kittle, saw him running around on Thursday and Friday, you think he can gut it out, but hamstring is tricky. That's the kind of injury that you could make worse. So with Williams, they could say, all right, it's painful, just take the whole week off, you're 36, you don't need to practice anyway, but you're not going to make it worse by playing out there, so why don't you just gut it out? And he will. So that makes sense. Doesn't mean he'll be good. He's probably far from 100%, but he's still better than the backup left tackle. With Kittle, he's been their best player on offense all year. He leads the team in touchdown catches by a lot. He's their red zone offense. With Aiyuk out, he's been the number one target. It's going to be interesting to see what the offense looks like without him because he's the guy who's been clicking.
Yeah, I mean, Seahawks fans certainly know that, and he has saved some of his best for the Seahawks over the years, and even in the first game had a terrific touchdown catch, got both toes in, where DK Metcalf was not able to get both toes in at the end of the first half. Big part of almost every victory for the 49ers against the Seahawks. What about from a blocking perspective? If Kittle doesn't play, obviously you know what he brings from a receiving perspective. I don't know Eric Saubert. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that last name right. Where do they lose from a blocking perspective, if anything?
I think Saubert's more of a blocking specialist, so he could probably get the job done. He's not nearly the receiver Kittle is. And I asked Kittle the other day, I was like, do you think you're having the best season of your career? Because statistically he might be. He was like, yes and no. My receiving, yes, but my blocking isn't what it... He didn't say it isn't what it used to be. I don't really like the tape I've put out there. He's 31 years old. I don't know that he plays with the same level of physicality that he used to. But he's a great player. With Saubert, I mean, you go from having the number one tight end receiving threat in the league right now, maybe number 2, although Kelsey isn't quite what he used to be, to having a guy who could have no catches today, right?
Well, I wonder what that does in terms of signaling to defenses what's coming, depending on what package. Like when Kittle's in there, it could just as easily be a run as it is a pass. Mm-hmm. When Saubert.
I don't think anyone knows at this point.
I at least try, but not well. If he's in there, doesn't seem like pass is as likely as it is when George Kittle's in there. Fair?
Well,
Not fair.
I mean, they're going to have a tight end on the field, so he's just not going to get a target. He's slow. He doesn't run routes. He's not much of a threat after the catch. He's not going to break tackles. Other than that, great receiver. So you don't have to worry about him. You can double the wide receivers if you want. And really, what it comes down to the Niners is how are you going to stop McCaffrey? That's the beginning and end of every team's defensive game plan. What are you going to do? And fortunately for the Seahawks right now, he's not, at least last week, he was not quite himself.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you about that. So McCaffrey comes back. Not much on the ground for him. Tough go sledding there, but had a pretty nice catch, over-the-shoulder catch from Brock Purdy. Seemed to be just as threatening as a receiver. What did you see from him in that first game?
He's a hell of a receiver. He can still move like that. You got to account for him. But as a runner, he got 4 yards after contact, which is not him. I mean, 3 yards per carry, 4 yards after contact. It seemed like he was maybe being cautious in his first game back, not to fumble. I mean, hadn't gotten hit in about a year. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if he plays with a little bit more aggression. Aggression in this guy. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Because McCaffrey at his peak plays with a ton of aggression. He's not just like a scat back, which is kind of what he was last week.
What does it do? I mean, Jordan Mason, last I checked, was well up there in yards, rushing yards for the league, yards per carry. Had a good game against the Seahawks before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Isaac Guerrero also had a big game against the Seahawks, right? So what from a running perspective does it mean for Jordan Mason? Obviously, Guerrero's not going to be getting carries if McCaffrey's back. How are they different as runners?
Well, McCaffrey is a good all-around runner. He's quick, he's fast, but he doesn't run a 4.3. He can run between the tackles, but he's not overly powerful. He can do a little bit of everything. Jordan Mason's the hardest runner in the league. I mean, he's up there with Derrick Henry. He's not as good as Derrick Henry, but he runs as hard as anyone. He doesn't have a ton of patience. Mm-hmm. They played the Chiefs over here, and Kareem Hunt was probably better than Jordan Mason in that game. Kareem Hunt has a nice pick and slide. Jordan Mason doesn't do that, but man, he averages 5 yards a carry in the league consistently for a reason. And when he's a free agent next year, he'll be one of the top targets in the league. And then Guerrero's a lot they drafted him to be Raheem Mostert-esque. They gave him his number. He runs a 4.3. He's got the upright running style. He's not going to hurt you that much between the tackles, but if you give him some space on the edge, 75 yards, he closed the game out against you in Seattle.
Yep.
And what's interesting is you have these 3 different runners who complement each other and are all good. And you think, oh man, a really creative coach like Kyle Shanahan's going to integrate them and use them all. And last week, McCaffrey, first game back in a year, clearly not in football shape, plays 56 of 62 snaps. Either Mason got 1 carry, Guerrero got 1 carry. The next day, someone asked Kyle, hey, how come you didn't play the other guys? He's like, man, when McCaffrey wasn't on the field, it felt like he was 100 plays he wasn't out there. It turns out it was only 6. So I don't know. I think he has a fear of not playing Christian.
It seems like a pretty risky maneuver to take maybe your most important offensive player the rest of the way, or at least the key difference maker from what they were at the start of the year, and coming off an injury that was serious enough that's kept him out this long, and then press him like that. Especially Achilles, where everything I've read about Achilles tendonitis is it's really hard to sometimes avoid rupture, and so workload seems like something to watch for a guy like that.
And it's why does he have Achilles tendonitis in the first place? Maybe it's the fact that he led the league in touches the last year.
Yeah.
This is how Kyle has used McCaffrey since he's gotten him. Every step of the way, people have been hey, you might want to throttle back that workload, and he's watch me not do that. Kyle's a little stubborn. Whereas if everyone in the media is telling him to do something because it's clearly common sense, he will not do that thing. Because he doesn't like being told what to do, and he can get away with doing anything and making it seem smart. He can do something that no other coach would do or would be ridiculed for doing. And if he does it, people are wait a second, it was Kyle. Let's try to see the genius in this and work backward from there.
There was a time where that was Pete Carroll and John Schneider.
Yes.
And Seahawks fans literally had a saying, in PCGAS we trust. And that was every odd move. They'd trade back and they'd take Bruce Irvin in the first round, and they were well, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And over and over and over again. And then that eroded over time.
Yes. Now, to their credit, they won a Super Bowl.
They did.
This group has that same level of buy-in and trust from a lot of fans and media without the ring, which is amazing.
You had a fun interaction, I would call it, with Mr. Shanahan earlier this week.
Yeah.
First of all, tell folks that don't know, like you were asking, there's a thing that's going on, or like I think I've seen the stories that, as I understand it, it seems like some defenses are taking advantage of the 49ers blocking schemes and pressure pickups, and that Brock Purdy does not have ability at the line of scrimmage to audible and change.
Right.
And so people have been asking.
Played out in the Super Bowl. Like there was like 9 unblocked rushers against the Chiefs. I mean, it was every critical down. There was an unblocked guy right in his face. It was, I mean, it keeps happening.
So it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's a thing.
And you think it wouldn't be a thing with such a smart quarterback.
So you asked about that this week a little bit. I think it's not the first time you've asked about it. What was your question? What was the answer?
Well, people have been asking Kyle a lot about like audibles. What kind of freedom does Brock have? And if you ask Kyle a football question, he doesn't want to answer it. I mean, like a critical one. But he'll brush you off if it's not very specific. So I wanted to ask approach the topic in a new way and not ask about audibles in general, but like hand signals in particular. So I asked Kyle, I was like, I just have a scheme question. If Brock Purdy's at the line of scrimmage and he sees a particular coverage, like say it's man-to-man coverage with a single high safety, does he have the freedom to change a route with the hand signal, which we've seen quarterbacks do from Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning? I didn't phrase it just like that,
right.
Pretty close. Does he have the freedom to change a route with a hand signal, like to a stutter go on the outside? Yeah. And he's like, all that stuff's built into the play calls, and we have hand signals for everything. And I'm like, okay. Then he's kind of left it at that, and then I tried to follow up because he gave me a 5-word answer, and he was like, got really upset. He was like, did I not give you the quotes you were looking for the article that you already wrote? I was like, whew, chill out there, slow down. So you have to like really stick with it and maintain a smile and be like, no, I just don't understand how a quarterback as smart as Brock goes about earning more license and freedom and authority at the line of scrimmage. And then he goes in, starts talking, and he says, well, not as many teams let quarterbacks do that anymore, which means some do. And I don't know, he basically said we give them 2 plays to choose from, and the answers are in one of those 2 plays, which is, I mean, clearly not. If they were, you wouldn't have this issue against the blitz, and you wouldn't be 5-4, and you wouldn't win the Super Bowl last year. So I think it's interesting when you get Kyle, and you ask him a question where he's vulnerable, that's how he acts.
Have you seen this show up this year? I mean, it feels like the 49ers offensive line is playing better in some ways than it did a year ago. In some cases, Trent Williams, for one, does not seem to be the same level of dominance he has been in past years. What's your kind of take on the offensive line right now for the 49ers?
Well, week 2 against Vikings, they went to Minnesota, faced Brian Flores, and couldn't pick up a blitz to save their lives. So it's been an issue against certain defensive coordinators who know what they're doing. This was an issue against Baltimore last year with Mike McDonald. He didn't seem to be able to replicate that a few weeks ago. I don't know what's going on with him and his pressure schemes. Like, is he the defensive coach that you hoped he would be, or is it too soon to say?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think one of the biggest challenges to evaluate that and make that determination is personnel. And in the first game against the 49ers, there were 8 players that are not going to be playing on this defense, just on defense. And so Mike McDonald has been pretty clear that he didn't have some of the guys doing, especially at the linebacker level, what he wanted. Fair. When he played the Rams last, which was, I would argue, their best defensive performance, really just pretty much shut down that offense for 4 quarters. They had the most unblocked pressures in the NFL that week.
Okay.
So the problem has been that they haven't been able to stop the run.
Okay.
They made some adjustments there. They've changed their alignment. They've gone to a little bit more of like tighter bare front kind of alignment.
Okay.
And they just completely shut down Kyren Williams. And then all of a sudden, here comes Ernest Jones running free as a free blitzer. So it isn't
interesting.
It's a question this week about whether the Seahawks front 7 with better linebacker play, better front 4 play is going to be more capable of stopping the run and unlocking some of those pressure packages.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we know that Mike McDonald knows what it takes to get the best of Kyle Shanahan schematically. He did it last year in Baltimore. He had some incredible talent. But if he did it against the Rams and the Niners are extremely similar. So let me ask you, like, how confident are you in the Seahawks' ability to pull off the upset? I mean, it's been 6 in a row they've lost?
Not 6 in a row, 5 out of 6.
5 out of 6?
Yes.
No, 6 in a row they've lost to the Niners.
Oh, the Niners, yes. Yeah.
It's a big hurdle for them.
It's a huge hurdle.
Yeah.
And they basically have to be a team they haven't been yet.
Yeah.
And predicting that or counting on it, I think, is never something you can be super confident in. I am really curious, though. I think that you've got a couple things going for the Seahawks in this game that they didn't have. One, on defense, I think they figured things out a little bit more, and they have the right players that they didn't necessarily have last time. They should be able to hang more. That said, I think the biggest question marks are on offense. I know your best buddy Gino Smith.
Gino.
You're
I've been thinking what I don't like about Gino. I think.
Why would you like him based on what you've seen against the 49ers?
Well, I've seen him play other teams, and he's had some really good games.
Yeah.
I think it's just his body language, man. There's something about when things start going bad against the Niners, he has this like that I can't. It's like the I just struck out look. You know what I mean? Like, oh, come on. I hate that. And like, I always admired Russell Wilson's body language because he always had this like, no, I'm going to win. Even if it was like you're down 16 with 4 minutes, like, no, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
I talked to Jesus. We got this. Like, it's like I don't know. He was very. I don't know. He was. People thought he was corny, and maybe he was, but he's a hell of a competitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair, and I think that's something that Gino absolutely.
Like, he's got this Job thing where it's like anything that could go wrong that's the body language. I think it's like, man, that's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy against the Niners.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, if I asked you who has the most passing yards against the 49ers this year, who would you say?
Gino.
Yeah, and it's not close.
So here's the thing about that game that was so interesting. It was out of hand. He brought him back.
Yeah.
And they might have actually won if DK had just run the right route. Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
I want to come back to Gino in a second, but let's talk about receivers, because there was an interesting story that came out from Adam Schefter yesterday.
Very interesting.
That the Seahawks they had a deal in place with the Raiders. They were going to take Deebo Samuel, and they were going to still take DK Metcalf, which I kind of call BS on.
Sure.
If they had taken Deebo Samuel, I don't think they're taking DK Metcalf. I think that came out as the story because they don't want to upset DK Metcalf.
Okay.
But, you had an interesting way of describing Deebo Samuel on a recent podcast. He's kind of multifaceted, but you came up with a name that maybe not as kind.
Look, Deebo has made a lot of money and he has a big reputation. He had that one great year, but really he's had one great year. And he's looked at as this like do everything kind of guy. But at this point in his career, he's kind of like a guy who can not really do anything that well. So I would compare him to a spork. Because a spork, when it's down in front of you, you think, man, that is versatile. Man, I can have some soup with that spork. I could eat a steak with that spork. But really, when you get down to eating time, you can't eat anything. It's just not helpful. And I think that's where the Niners are at with Deebo right now. Like, is he really one of their best 2 wide receivers? They got Jawan Jennings, who's killing it. They got Ricky Pearsall, who got shot in the chest and survived. Would you bench that guy? I wouldn't. I mean, he's been playing really well despite getting shot in the chest, and he's been getting better every game. Meanwhile, Deebo is the human spork. So I don't know. He's got to figure out. The Niners have to figure out how they want to utilize the spork in their offense. It's tough.
Now, I mean, Samuel's destroyed the Seahawks. So Seahawks fans have trouble understanding how he's not destroying other teams. Like, he had the big touchdown in the last game.
Because you didn't cover him.
He was not covered.
Cover him. Here's the thing about Deebo. You know how to shut down Deebo Samuel? Cover him. It's especially man to man. He can't run a route, beat press.
He's still a tackle breaker, though. Yeah.
3 this year.
What? No way.
Let's look it up.
I'm gonna look it up.
Pro Football Reference.
Okay, you got Pro Football Reference.
Whatever. I mean, Deebo. I mean, yeah, they have it. Deebo Samuel stats. You can do a PFF.
All right, I'm gonna go. Let's see if I can get it just by looking
Deebo.
him up. So you don't think he has been breaking tackles?
No. He's averaging like 3 yards a carry. He's not the runner he used to be.
All right, let's see if I can get
He's 29.
rushing when he's running, they have broken tackles here. Missed tackles forced. They have him for 8.
That's different than.
So different charting companies
Yeah.
have different things. All right, but you're saying not a lot of broken tackles against the Seahawks. He had 1, but he's only had 1 in the last 3 weeks. At least when he's running the
His
ball.
running grade's pretty low.
Yeah. And if you go to rushing, let's take. Is that was rushing or is that receiving? Let's go like receiving. Does he have missed tackles forced here? Missed tackles forced. So I don't know if it's the same. They're just counting the same for both. But in any event,
if you watch him though, like he's not. He used to be the kind of guy you'd like on 3rd and 12, they'd throw him a screen and he'd break 3 tackles and he might get the first down. Like he's not that guy anymore, at all.
Well, so that's Deebo. The other side of that's DK Metcalf. I'm fascinated to hear your perspective on a player that there's an interesting division among Seahawks fans about DK Metcalf.
I think DK Metcalf's a great player. That being said, it seems like he's not the most coachable guy. Like he'll just freelance when you don't need him to, or he'll get in a fight when you don't need him to. Mm-hmm. But like if he had a quarterback and a coach he respected, like if he were on like the late 90s Niners with Steve Young and Jerry Rice, like he would have fell in love. Like that was T.O. Remember T.O. was the worst teammate ever. But on the Niners with Steve Young and Jerry Rice, he was Terrell Owens. He was Sir Yes Sir. He was like one of the best number 2 receivers ever. I just look at that as kind of a failure of the culture of the team. Like you can't get DK to buy. He's a great player. Anyone would want him.
Do you think he's a great player?
I think he's a great player. Okay. Absolutely.
Why do you think that, given how he's performed against the 49ers?
I mean,
Diamador Lenore doesn't think he's a great player after the last game.
I love Diamador Lenore, but
I know you do.
I think that matchup's going to happen today. And Lenore's good, but he can get mossed. And DK could do the mossing. So I just feel like when he's locked in, there's no more physically imposing wide receiver in the league. The issue with him is being locked in.
There was an incident last year, maybe just a blip on the radars for 49ers fans, but not for Seahawks fans, where late in the game, Fred Warner hits DK Metcalf in the back neck area.
Yeah.
DK Metcalf gets up, grabs his face back. DK Metcalf gets a personal foul. Kyle Shanahan, after the game, acknowledges that he had incentivized his players to try to trigger DK Metcalf because they thought he would react and they could get a personal foul. That didn't go over well with a lot of Seahawks fans. It felt like a little bit echoes of Bounty Gate kind of stuff. What's the kind of reaction around here about DK Metcalf and his kind of inability to keep himself under control?
I think that's just the book on him. Like he's a really great player, but you can play mind games with him. Mm-hmm. You know, you can get in his head and he can lose his composure. And if that's probably the best way to play defense against him because no one actually has a corner who can match up. So get in his head. I remember one time Robert Saleh would get in his head. He would ask questions. He would answer questions about DK before the game. He'd do it in a very politically correct way. The question I'd ask, how do you handle someone? How do you teach your defensive backs to hit DK Metcalf? He wanted me to ask this question. He asked me to ask this question. How do you teach your DBs to hit DK Metcalf? Grant, it's a great question. If you hit him in the typical strike zone, a lot of times DBs will just bounce off him. So sometimes you got to coach your DBs to go a little bit lower on DK, which of course he would never actually coach his DBs to go after his knees, but he wanted DK to think he would. And all he wanted was DK to drop one pass, and he did. So there are ways you can try to get into DK's head. Hey, we're going to take out your legs. Hey, we're going to hit you after the play. We're going to talk crap. All that stuff is in the scouting report, and he needs to understand that and try to rise above it.
Well, and he has had a fumbling problem as well, and some of the first times I remember that have been coming against the 49ers where he's fighting for extra yards. I think it happened in Gino's first year as a starter, 2022, during the regular season. I believe it might have happened in the playoff game. I can't remember for sure as well, but that's been an issue, and it's cropped up again this year. There's two or three straight games where he had that problem, and it cost the team a lot. But there's another receiver I wanted to ask you about, and the story of the offseason, whether people wanted it to be or not, was Brandon Aiyuk, right? It went on and on.
Not
and
just
on.
for the
Probably
Niners, but
made
the
you
league.
a lot of good money.
And the Steelers, right? Like just like all the teams that were speculated about
all
being
that.
in. Yeah.
And even before it was settled, I wondered aloud if the 49ers' best move was not to trade that guy, get some draft capital, and rely on Juwan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, and Ricky Pearsall. Well, now Brandon Ayuk's out. Juwan Jennings played his first game as X last week, and he looked pretty damn good.
He did.
Are the 49ers in a situation where they've just paid their X like a ton of money, who's going to having a major surgery, and their better player might be Juwan Jennings?
Yes, that's exactly the situation. That's not me smiling at Brandon Ayuk's misfortune. It's just it's ironic. It's not even ironic. It's just.
It's a fascinating story.
It's a fascinating storyline because they've had Juwan Jennings on the team for 5 years. Like they had all this time to figure out exactly who he is. They never played him at X. And really like down the stretch last year, he was surpassing Aiyuk. Aiyuk didn't produce in the playoffs. He didn't produce in the Super Bowl. He was like getting in he was like DK Metcalf. And I think the Chiefs knew it. They were trash talking him. He would get in little skirmishes after plays. Meanwhile, Juwan Jennings had a touchdown catch, a touchdown pass. He was going to be the Super Bowl MVP if the Niners knew the overtime rules. Like he was really ascending last year. He carried it over this year. The Niners would have been so much smarter to just do nothing with Brandon Aiyuk or trade him. But giving him all that money, it's going to hurt them down the line. You already see it right now. The Niners, when you thought of their defense, it used to be, man, they have one of the most ferocious defensive lines in the league. Not anymore. Now it's Nick Bosa and the Bosettes. That's pretty much it. Their front seven is Bosa and Fred Warner and guys you don't know. I want
to ask you about Nick Bosa. Before we do that and get to some of these super chats, we've got a bunch of people donating. Rick R has donated not just 5 but 10 Hawk Blogger memberships. Thank you, Rick, for doing that. We got Mr. Puppy. Mr. Puppy has donated 5 Hawk Blogger memberships, and Zabel Thomas has gifted one as well. If you are one of the people that has got one of these free memberships, give one. Pay it forward. This is a great way to bring more great, kind people in the community, have some fun with it, and help out somebody else. So, super chat from John Naylor says, Grant and his pop are a great listen. Grant has the best and coldest takes on Kyle Juszczyk. Speaking of Kyle Juszczyk, I saw the film breakdown you did with your coach friends this week. Kyle Juszczyk seems like he's struggling.
He's 34 years old.
Yeah.
He's not the physically imposing. 2019 was a long time ago. Back when they went to the Super Bowl the first time, he was a hell of a player. He was an absolute feature of their offense, made them better. Now it just seems like he's a decoy. He's window dressing. He goes in motion, he goes left to right, he goes right to left. He misses his block, he doesn't get the ball. He's Kyle's friend. He's the coach's friend. So he's on the team, he's making money, he's on the field. Where Jordan Mason should be on the field. Ricky Pearsall should be on the field. Whatever rationale they have for playing Juszczyk, there's someone else who's better, more dangerous. And I wonder if, really, like anytime Juszczyk comes on the field today, Seahawks fans should be like,
Seahawks fans can't be that yet, because basically anybody that wanted to do anything against this defense for about 4 weeks was able to do it, including the 49ers. And part of what was working for them in that game was Juszczyk was making blocks in that game.
God, I hated that.
But it's true, and one of the things Mike McDonald's talked about is linebackers need to get off blocks. And I think that's a huge reason why the 2 linebackers that started in that game aren't even on the roster anymore.
Okay.
And so, as a Seahawks fan, I think a lot of Seahawks fans out there are looking at this as every time they play the 49ers, the blocks are so sticky and the defenders are just basically playing patty cake, and the 49ers run for as much as they need to win by double digits. I'm curious, do you feel like, as someone who has seen the Seahawks, just be blown out pretty much every game against 49ers recently, is there anything about the Seahawks matchup that you're intrigued by, or you wonder whether this could be the time that it's different?
Certainly. If they're finally healthy, if they've tweaked their front, If they had success against Kyron Williams and the Rams, then why not today? I mean, Trent Williams clearly isn't 100% healthy. Neither is McCaffrey's 100% healthy, but he's not really in football shape yet.
Okay.
Yeah, why not? The freaking Buccaneers just held him to 3 yards a carry last week, and I couldn't name 4 players on their defense. So, yes, I think the Niners are vulnerable, and if you're ever going to take them down, today would be the day.
Speaking of that game, and Nick Bosa, which we were going to talk about before, Bosa said it was the most pain he ever played in last week against Tampa. You've talked about him being like a pretty straightforward interview, tells you guys exactly what he's thinking. There was some question about whether he might be able to go, but it sounds like he's going to. Any reason to think he's going to be full strength? Do you think he's going to be as limited as he was last week? Any indication one way or another about Nick Bosa?
The thing about Nick, he wasn't great last week, but he really hasn't been great all year.
Interesting.
He hasn't been great since he signed his contract. He's a very talented player. So even when, he's like, we know Joe, like, look, he's slipping into the Joey Bosa era of his career. Like, Joey was dominant, Joey got paid, Joey went into cruise control, which is still better than most DNs. But that's the way I see the Bosas. Like, they're both extremely rich, and they're not as good as they were when they were younger. And with Bosa, it's like, where does it show up? He still gets pressures. He's still around the quarterback, but he leads the team in missed tackles. He's not a particularly good run defender. He's not what they're paying. And he's not closing games. There was that very famous, not famous, but that highlight play last week against the Bucs. 4th and 7. Mayfield has the ball, rolls out of the pocket. Bosa grabs him by the shoulder and doesn't pull him down. Like, Mayfield just keeps rolling to the sideline, and it almost looked like Bosa was escorting him there, and then Mayfield completes an 8-yard pass to extend the drive. I was like, what?
That was a pretty amazing play.
It was an amazing play, and the $34 million a year pass rusher, be expected to sort of like drag him down. When asked about it, he was like, yeah, I don't know. I thought if I tried to bring him down, he might be able to make the throw. It's like, yeah, but he made the throw when you didn't bring him. Anyway, it hasn't been the Bosa that we remember.
Well, in the first matchup with the Seahawks, he was going up against Stone Forsythe. Seahawks third. Stone Forsythe. 6'8", whatever he is, gave up 11 pressures by himself in that game.
That's impressive.
Third string right tackle.
Yeah.
The Seahawks got down to their 4th string right tackle, a 6th-round rookie, Mike Jarrell from Findlay College, for multiple games.
Who hasn't heard it? Who can't remember Findlay College?
Findlay College,
sure.
The powerhouse that it is. And today, for the first time all year, Abe Lucas, their actual starter, is expected to play at right tackle. Don't know how many snaps. Wow. Don't know what that's going to be. Abe Lucas is a very different right tackle than who they were going up against last time. And interestingly, Bosa, all those pressures, they came against the right side of the Seahawks line.
Right.
He didn't actually do very well against Charles Cross, the left tackle. So
that's Bosa.
In a world where the Seahawks get better tackle play, doesn't have to be great, but just better tackle play from the right side, who else is someone that can create some havoc for the 49ers? Like Evan Anderson, is he somebody that people should know about? No?
Yeah, he made a nice play. He is an undrafted free agent rookie. He's number 69. He made a nice play at the end of the game against the Bucs. He's a defensive tackle. He probably won't play more than 20 snaps, but in his handful of opportunities, he looks disruptive, which is like he might be the second best defensive lineman on the team. Just like, it's either him, Malik Collins will make a play once a month. Leonard Floyd hasn't made a play yet this year. Sam Okwanu is a person that's playing for the 49ers now. Have you ever heard of him?
He was playing pretty well to start the year.
He was playing pretty well.
It doesn't seem like it's going as well lately.
I mean, these are just guys. Sometimes they have good games, but they're just guys. I mean, and this is what the Niners sort of banked on. They got rid of all their highly paid players on defense except for Warner, now Deommodore Lenoir, and Nick Bosa, and they're hoping that their offense, which has a bunch of highly paid players, can carry the team, and they're 5-4.
A couple last things. I'll let you go. If you have any questions, let me know. But
who's going to win?
Who's going to win? I predicted the Seahawks are going to win.
Oh,
I have.
I like that. Interesting. Okay, give me your rationale.
So start with this. I don't think the 49ers are the team that they've been in the past.
Agree.
So this is not the team where I think they just walk on the field and they beat whoever's across from
Nope,
them.
absolutely not.
So that's one. Two, I look at that game that they played the first week, and the Seahawks gave up 458 yards, of offense. I mean, it's 480 yards of offense, 230 yards rushing. They played about as poorly as you can on defense. We're down 23-3, and still had the ball twice with the chance to win in the fourth quarter. Granted, it was a kickoff return touchdown, some fluky stuff there.
But the Niners have the worst special teams unit in the league, so that was not necessarily fluky.
No, and so I look at that and I'm like, all right, that was and I thought Gino Smith had his least accurate game. He just really, forget the interceptions. He missed Jackson Smith and Jigba on a third down throw. There's just a number of things that just weren't right. DK Metcalf did not play well. So I think that DK Metcalf and Gino Smith know that this is a game they have to prove something.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any more leeway. And so I have a feeling they're going to play better than they did. Doesn't have to be great, but I think they'll play better than they did. Jackson Smith and Jigba, since that game, has emerged as a much bigger threat than he had up until that point.
Yep, that's big.
I think that's going to change where Gino's progressions are and how much he's going to. He was forcing a lot of passes to DK in that first matchup.
He was.
I think he might be more willing to go other places. And then the other piece of it,
this all checks out, Hawks fans. So far, I'm convinced. Keep going.
I think people can't overestimate how much the right tackle situation was a problem for the Seahawks.
Yep.
Over 60% of the Seahawks pressures have come from the right side of the line. Most of those have come from right tackle.
Okay.
If Abe Lucas can just be mediocre, that's a huge upgrade from what they've been rolling out there. And then we already talked about the defensive changes. It's a different crew, and I think Mike Macdonald's coming into this game feeling like he's ready to put 2 games back to back that are going to really, in the division, that are going to say, okay, the defense is going the right direction.
Sure.
So all of that, plus
no Kittle.
Yeah.
Now McCaffrey's back, but no Kittle. That's a big one.
And then an achy Trent Williams and an achy Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't bet a house on it, but there's some aspects of this that make me think this is going to be the game that things turn around.
It feels like it's going to be another close game that comes down to the end. And
who would you want in that game? The guy Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan. Brock Purdy, who has been one of the best quarterbacks in football. Number 2 in the NFL in passing yards, behind the guy who's for the Seahawks, number 1 in the NFL in passing yards, Gino Smith. Gino Smith, who has played terribly against the 49ers, but has the most game-winning drives of any quarterback over the last 2.5 years.
It's true.
I think I'd go with San Francisco in that situation, but then you also have a backup punter who's going to be doing holding for a kicker who missed 3 field goals last week.
That's true.
So I'm just wondering if it's close, I don't know. Where do you?
I mean, Brock's a great player, and he kind of owns Seattle right now. He's not a great player. He's a very good player, and he owns Seattle right now. But he's not the guy who's going to lead you from behind. His game-winning drives are usually field goals. That's not. He's the kind of guy who gets the lead and holds it. So if it's a close game, and Gino isn't locked in on DK like you said, Gino could pull it off. I think the emergence of Jackson Smith and Jigba is huge because. Yeah, Diamador Lenore is really good, and you probably shouldn't test him too much, but Renardo Green's a rookie. Isaac Yadam's a journeyman. You can't go at 22 enough. Yadam, he's solid on his best day and a liability on his worst. So, yeah.
Interesting. Well, Grant, man.
This is a lot of fun.
Always fun, dude.
Yeah.
In person with Grant Cohn. Tell people what you got coming up. You got a post-game show that'll come up after?
Absolutely, yeah. I will do it from right down there, and about a couple hours after the game, with my not so instant reaction. I'll do I like to, as I'm walking to the press conference, I'll do a little something. Very low tech. I'm kind of embarrassed sitting next to.
No.
I'm gonna have to ask him some questions after this.
Yeah. Make sure you follow him at Grant Cohn. Funniest and best content out there. Funny because Grant's got a wit about him, even though if you get past that, the analysis is freaking good. So people think he's just trying to be a hot take guy. He's a great writer of clickbait headlines, I'll say that. But if you actually read or listen to what he says, it's not clickbait. It's actually thoughtful analysis about the team. I've learned about the 49ers, things that I wouldn't have otherwise, and I laugh along the way, which is a bonus. So
that was very nice. Thank you very much.
Appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. And I will see you all for a post-game show. I'm not sure from where. I'm going to see if I can get on the field, but I have to find a press guy to see if they'll let me do that. But until then, I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Hawk Blogger. Take care, y'all. Good luck.